the fairness doctrine ought to be there, and I also think the equal time doctrine ought to come back.
The very same people who don't want the fairness doctrine want the FCC to limit pornography on the air. I am for that. I think pornography should be limited.
One of the most profound changes in the balance of the media is when the conservatives got rid of the equal time requirements.
Well, in my view, talk radio tends to be one-sided. It also tends to be dwelling in hyperbole. It's explosive.
Absolutely amazing to me. These people put on suits and dresses every day, some both, and go out and, I guess, suggest to everyone that will listen they know the best way for America to run. Yeah, talk radio is generally conservative because that's what sells on radio, at least talk radio. Now, if you're looking for fairness and all of the other kind of stuff, go to a different format. Go to the alternative rock station. You're not going to find a lot of conservatives there. You'll find mostly liberals. That's just the way it works. And it works because people buy what they want. They're not force-fed something politically. The fairness doctrine, I am fully convinced, is dead. The old fairness doctrine. But something probably worse is coming down the road because the FCC has announced the roster of a new advisory committee that is meeting on Thursday to come up with recommendations to make talk radio more fair. To make it more fair. You know, why didn't the conservatives do the same thing with television? Why didn't the conservatives do the same thing with the newspapers across the country? Because they were an open and fair market bunch. If people want it, they ought to be allowed to buy it. But guess what? Newspapers are falling left and right because people are sick of the far left hyperbole. Television stations are having a tough time too. That's the problem. This government doesn't want you to have a choice. They don't want you to purchase what you choose. They want you to want what they say you should want. That's a sign of an oppressive government. Well, Rick, you're biased. Of course I'm biased. I have a bias. Everybody does. If they say they don't, they're lying to you. I'm a conservative talk show host. I'm not a Republican, but I'm a conservative. Why? Because I've lived life long enough to figure out, at least for me, that's the most successful way to live my life, both personally and professionally. Am I liberal in some areas? Of course. No one is 100% conservative, or for that matter, 100% liberal. It's impossible. But in the bigger picture, when it comes to political issues and most social issues, and when it comes to the economy on a grander scale, I'm conservative. Because I have figured out through living life for the number of years I've lived it, that makes sense. As I've told you politically many, many times, the reason I'm an independent is because I don't dismiss automatically out of hand someone just because of their political affiliation. Every once in a while, I find something on the left that makes absolute sense to me. And I don't carry the water for any political party. But if you've lived long enough to see how things work in life, and lived long enough to have some understanding of how human beings are wired up, and have seen what happens when human beings are allowed to do anything at any time under any circumstance, and there are no checks and balances and parameters and guidelines, and you've seen human beings lower themselves to the lowest common denominator. You know, I've often said, I don't think anyone should be allowed to vote until they've been responsible for one other human being other than themselves for at least a year, and have had at least one job during a 1 year period, 12 calendar months, where taxes were taken out. Then you have the benchmarks, the parameters, the guidelines to vote for the people that are in charge of those things. You know, this whole fairness thing is nothing more than an outgrowth from the Democrats losing at the polling places. That's all it is. You know, they own television for the most part. They own Hollywood in totality, save for a few actors and actresses. They own most magazines and newspapers. The only thing they don't own is talk radio. Talk radio, specifically that format of radio. And they want it. They want it bad. And they'll do anything they have to do to get it. So this whole commission, this study, this panel that is meeting on Thursday, they're meeting under the auspice of diversity in ownership, even though they fully admit that they've commissioned reports that tell them the more women and minorities they can get in radio ownership and management, the more likely they are to get on their progressive talk radio shows. Well, here's a blast. Not that it means anything to the Obama administration, but in a free and open marketplace, if progressive talk radio worked and you could sell it, you wouldn't need to be forming the panel. You wouldn't need to be forming a strategy to find some way in to a format that doesn't want you. It's not that I don't want you, the listeners don't want you. And, you know, we refer to Air America, probably the most notable of all the grand liberal experiments getting into talk radio. You can't say it failed because they didn't have enough money. George Soros poured money into that thing like sand in a rat hole and just kept pouring it. And they're getting ready to file bankruptcy for the second time. Why? Because that format, that content on talk radio specifically as a format, doesn't sell. Liberals talk a good game, but they very, very rarely back it up with involvement. I'll say that again. Because when you talk to a liberal, most liberals, most of them, have the attitude that they're just too hip for the room. They're pseudo-intellectuals, and they talk it up big time. But most liberals very, very, very rarely follow up with any substance. And that's what talk radio is about. It's about substance. It's about involvement. It's about being invested in each other. It's about the country. It's about your kids. It's about all those things that liberals give lip service to, but very rarely follow up on. So ultimately, it doesn't work. It's not commercially viable. And at the end of the day, this is a commercial business. If you don't turn a profit, you don't have a microphone that works. You don't have lights that go on. You don't have staffers to do jobs. The thing that is most disconcerting about this particular era of the fairness doctrine, or something akin to it, is that Barack Obama and the White House minions don't seem to care much about private ownership or the private sector as far as a free and open marketplace goes. They want you to want what they want you to want, period. And if it's the only choice, then you'll take it. All right, we'll take your calls, 1-800-760-KFMB. Again, it's not that I'm trying to be argumentative, but if liberal talk radio worked commercially, then it would be there, and it would be viable, and it would be thriving. It has been tried, and there's nothing to keep some private sector from doing it again and again and again and again and again until maybe they hit on the right formula. But basically what the government is saying is, hey, it's not so much about the talk show hosts that are commanding ownership of the airwaves, it's about the people listening. The people listening. And the argument is, well, they just haven't been given the other side. Oh, they've been given the other side. They just reject it. All right, we'll take your calls on this. 1-800-760-KFMB, 1-800-760-5362. Bottom line is this: whether you like it or whether you don't, it appears that the FCC is blowing full steam ahead to enact some type of fairness doctrine, balancing the airwaves, providing diversity through the airwaves. What is it you want? Specifically, what do you want? When you turn that radio on in the morning or the afternoon, what do you want to hear coming out? All right? That's the question. 1-800-760-KFMB, 1-800-760-5362.